Welcome back. On today's episode, we're going to talk about upgrading from being a PA to a second AC, Braveheart, Legends of the Fall, Twilight Zone the movie, and of course, operating while you're upside down. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. Make sure to check out our website, theop.io, and if you like it, become a member so you can watch the breakdown where operators talk about everything that goes into the making of a shot, and read the musings where we talk about everything from quick tips to larger concepts behind operating. I may or may not take a couple of breaks during this episode, but I promise you none of them will be longer than 22 seconds. If you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, like us, talk about us, and share us with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy the op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining in for the op. My name is Dave Comides, and I'm the host here. I'm a camera Steadicam operator, and through the course of this podcast, we're talking to operators and other people like today about the art of visual storytelling and the operator's place in it. Today, I'm really excited to have an amazing cinematographer, formerly an incredible operator, John Toll, with us. John Toll was an operator on films such as Peggy Sue Got Married, Scarface, The Falcon and the Snowman, Twilight Zone, to name a few. John has had 24 award nominations and 18 wins, according to my counting, including 2 Academy Awards for Legends of the Fall and Braveheart, 2 ASC Awards for Legends of the Fall and The Thin Red Line, and ASC and Camera Image Lifetime Achievement Awards. He's worked with directors such as Francis Ford Coppola, Ed Zwick, Terrence Malick, Mel Gibson, Cameron Crowe, the Wachowskis, Ang Lee, and everybody else, and has shot just about every genre out there. It's a real pleasure to have you here, John. Thank you so much, and thanks for being here today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So if you ran into someone who wasn't in the film industry and you had to describe or explain what a camera operator is, esoterically, specifically, however you want to answer that, what would you say it is?
Very simply, is the person on the set who operates the camera. He's a guy who sits behind the camera, and that's how you can identify who the camera operator is. The job is quite a bit more complicated than that, but in terms of simple identification, he is the person on the set who's sitting at the camera looking through the eyepiece.
But as you said, it's a little more complicated than that, isn't it? As I believe you probably recall and have seen as a cinematographer. Yeah,
well, with the working relationship, with how the camera operator works with everyone else on the set is a very complicated process. And I found it different depending on the personalities you're working with. So I think there's no simple answer to what does a camera operator, how does it function, how does that job category function, what is the relationship with everyone on the set, and blah, blah, blah. It's extremely complicated depending on who the other people happen to be that you're working with.
It's one of the reasons I ask you, because I'm still trying to figure it out myself, to be perfectly honest.
Well, and it changes depending on the personalities you're working with.
Absolutely.
And so it requires an incredible amount of talent, skill, and flexibility, political flexibility in terms of how you interact with everyone else on the set. And I've never found any 2 situations to be identical in terms of the nature of that collaboration and how it works out. And it all depends on who the director of photography is, who the director is, and the approach of the individual camera operator. It's a tricky sort of politically balanced and balancing situation.
So you have to be a bit of a chameleon, basically, psychologically, I guess.
So you have to be smart about how you approach the work, and you know what your objectives is, but how you'll go about addressing that depends on the other personalities of the people you're working with.
Sure. Has camera operating intrinsically changed from back when you were categorized as a camera operator to now, do you think?
I think mechanically it has, but I think in terms of the political dynamic, I don't believe it has changed.
And so since we've already mentioned it a couple of times, I'll maybe dive right in. So the politics of it all, when you're working with a cinematographer, there's obviously that dynamic. And then you're also working as a camera operator, you're working for the director as well. And can you just talk about that? I don't know if you've ever had experiences where, the cinematographer and the director weren't seeing eye to eye, or one wanted the other and the other wasn't sure, or et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I was fortunate that when I worked as an operator, once I figured out how to perform the job,
Yeah.
I found that the working relationship between the operator and the director of photography and the director was completely different depending on who those personalities were, who the director of photography and the director was. So it was a question of camera operator being able to assess that and being able to work inside that dynamic, because I never found that the working relationship between the director of photography and the camera operator were ever the same. So you basically had to adjust depending on who those personalities were, and the nature of the director and the director of photography relationship had as much to do with the job of the camera operator as anything. So that was my experience. And I was fortunate that I was able to, number one, that I was working with some really talented people, directors and directors of photography, and I was able to assess that dynamic relatively early on in the process, and realized that my job as a camera operator was completely dependent on the dynamic, the working relationship and the dynamic between the director and the director of photography, and then the director of photography and the camera operator.
Uh-huh.
And I was fortunate that I, as a operator, I was able to work with some really great directors of photography, and I never found that working relationship ever to be the same. So it required an incredible amount of flexibility.
Yeah.
And you just had to go with the flow and figure it out,
Who were some of your favorite directors of photography to work with as an operator?
Working backwards, Conrad Hall, Jordan Cronenwith, Alan Davio,
Oh my gosh.
John Alonzo, and David Myers.
Amazing. That's an incredible list of people. And you said John Alonzo moved you up from camera assistant to camera operator on a show?
Yeah, I became a camera operator. I was working as a camera assistant with John.
Yeah.
And he got the opportunity to direct a film called FM.
FM, right? Yeah, okay.
And prior to him getting that job, he had told me that as his camera assistant, the next job he got, he was going to promote me to camera operator. He didn't know what that job was. The next job happened to be he got a job directing. Okay. And he hired a director of photography named David Myers.
Okay.
A guy who had worked with when they both had shot documentary. David had shot feature films, but he was primarily a documentary cinematographer.
Yeah.
So and John had told me prior to that, said, the next job, I'm going to promote you to operator. And I said, oh, that's cool. That's okay. And then he just by accident happened, his next job was as a director.
Wow.
He was hired to direct.
Oh, he's a man of his word. That's nice.
And I went to John. I said, okay, you aren't shooting this film.
Yeah.
It's going to be a different DP. Don't worry about moving me up. You should do what's appropriate for yourself, and let David hire whoever he wants to hire as a camera operator. And John said, okay, well, we'll think about it. And that was David, who lived in San Francisco, was not around, so he was not part of that conversation.
Gotcha.
So, and this was probably 6 weeks before this movie was supposed to start. So David shows up, and he's prepping the film, and John said, I know who the operator is, and he told David the operator was going to be John Toll. And David didn't know me, and I didn't know him. And David assumed that I was an experienced operator and that I had been operating with John. But John didn't tell him that this would be my first job as an operator.
All right.
So we start prepping, and we're into prep for about a week or so. And I go to, and there was no conversation about you were a first-time operator. That was sort of not part of the conversation. And David's assuming that I've been around, I'm a guy, that I've been working with John. And so it was kind of cool.
Did you assume that he had been told that?
Yeah, no, of course.
So you thought that he knew.
Yeah, I thought he knew. He thought I'd been working with John for years as an operator.
So there's no stress.
So I finally figured it out. I go to David and I said, by the way, if there's another person that you would prefer as operator and that you don't want to work with a first-time operator, then the operator should be whoever you choose to be, as the DP.
This is during prep, you said.
And David said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, this is my first job as an operator." And John promised me that the next job, before he got a job directing, he had promised me he was going to hire me as the operator. And David said, "That's surprising, So he says, "I'll think about it." So he did, and he talked to John, and John said, "Yeah, well, we're going to move him up." And I told him we were going to move him up, and blah, blah, blah. So David said, "No, okay, that's cool." And David his background was as a documentary cameraman.
Okay.
He had been shooting and operating documentaries for years, and he had done some features, used an operator. But in David's mind, we were all one big crew, and it was kind of cool. And okay, if John felt comfortable with me as an operator, then it was fine with David. Then it's okay. You're the operator, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's how we started the project. But it was my first job as an operator, and as an AC, I'd been working with John for a couple of years and taking guest shots, and it's like, it all started on a movie called Black Sunday, and which is a whole other story.
Okay.
But anyway, John felt comfortable with my skills as an operator because I had been, even as a first AC, I had been operating at times. So John was cool with it. David said that if John was cool, then he was cool. And so I was the operator. I started, and it was funny. And so we started in the first couple of days of shooting. I discovered, because I had operated and done a lot of operating on documentaries, but I discovered that on long takes, this was a traditional feature film.
Sure.
And John was into complicated masters and long takes, and that went on for 3-4 minutes. And I discovered after a minute or two, I had trouble I was looking through my right eye. I had trouble keeping my left eye shut. And so I discovered that after a couple of minutes on a take, I couldn't keep my left eye shut, and my left eye kept opening, and I had my dominant vision was through my left eye, and even though I was looking through the camera with my right eye, all I could see was what my left eye was seeing. So I discovered this during takes on the first couple of days of shooting. So I figured, this is a problem. It's like, if I'm going to operate the camera, I got to be able to see through the camera during the entire take. Yeah. And I discovered this the hard way, while we were shooting. So after, the first day of this, I went to John because I had the working relations with him. And I said, "John, we got problems. It's like I can't do these long takes because I can't keep my left eye shut after a couple of minutes, And he said, "That's no problem. Just open your left eye until you can relax the muscles in your left eye," because my left eye kept opening. I couldn't keep it shut. Yeah. He said, just open your left eye for a few seconds, and then you relax those muscles, and you'll be able to see through the camera with your right eye. Mm-hmm. So I tried that, and it worked. So it was like, okay, cool. So then I tried that, whenever necessary, and it turned out that I was okay. I could see through my right eye if I opened my left eye, relaxed those muscles, and then shut it, and I could do takes that lasted 3 or 4 minutes.
I'm guessing that as your first feature, when you were going into it, that wasn't the problem you were concerned about immediately.
Well, I had acquired. I have to go back a little bit, because I had worked on a lot of documentaries. I came into business working in a documentary film company. Yeah. Oh, wow. And as a PA, and I hung out with the camera assistants and learned how to be a camera assistant.
Do you remember what years that was? Ballpark?
It's the 1960s. Uh-huh. It was during the 1968 presidential campaign, which is 68 was pretty wild.
Amazing. So were you shooting with like Bolexes and CP16s and things like that? Or?
No, I have to go back even further.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first job I got in the film business was working as a PA at a documentary film company, David Wolper's company. Wow. And my sister's husband had been an AD, and he got a job as a production supervisor. So, and I was in college in L.A. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I came up here, and I was I went to school at Cal State, L.A., and got a part-time job working at David Wolper's production company through Bob Anderson, who was my sister's husband. And I knew nothing about the film business, like zero. So he hired me as a PA and like part-time. I had always been interested in photography as a kid. I had Instamatic cameras. I had no formal training as a photographer. All photography was just stuff I'd picked up by looking through cameras.
So you weren't in school for film. You were just in school.
No, I was school. I was thinking about going to law school. I was in that didn't seem like a very good idea. I was always interested in history. I thought, okay, I'll be a historian, whatever, however you make money as an historian. And that didn't work out. But I was still in school and got this job working as a PA part-time at a documentary film company, Bob's. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. It's kind of in the film business. I had always been interested in photography. And so David Wolpers was a really great documentary filmmaker. Uh-huh. And he had a company with an office building on Sunset Boulevard. And so I was the PA with no kind of like formal responsibilities. They had purchased 3 cameras, 2 Eclair NPRs and an Aries.
Okay.
And it just sat in this sort of storage room next to the shipping department. Yeah. And nobody maintained it. There was no full-time staff that knew anything about the cameras. And whenever they had a job, the camera assistants would come in and say, "There's the cameras. We don't want to rent cameras. We bought these cameras. And the camera assistants would come in and prep the cameras. Okay. So because the cameras were sitting in the storeroom, and I was interested in photography, not formally, I said, okay, I'm going to check out the cameras and figure out how they work, because I'd never handled a 16-millimeter camera. So I did this for a while, and then they had a show that was starting, and camera assistants came in to prep. And one of the camera assistants was Otto Nimitz.
Oh, my gosh.
Otto used to work as a camera assistant.
I had no idea.
His first job in the business was working as a camera assistant, freelance camera assistant in Los Angeles. Wow. And Otto came in. He kind of showed me how to set up the cameras and how they worked. And then there was a documentary in 1968, and Otto was hired as the camera assistant. And he said, I could use a second. And they said, well, we can't afford a second. He was like, but we got this guy who's a PA. We're already paying him nothing. Yeah. And why don't you use him as your camera assistant? That's great. And because he had checked me out on the cameras, he said, oh, okay, I'll train him. Yeah. So I worked as a camera assistant for Otto Nimitz. Wow. On a documentary about Jean-Claude Keeley, the skier, in 1968. And we had 2 Eclair NPRs and an Aries, and that's how I learned how to use 16-millimeter cameras through Otto. That was cool. That was in that summer. And so I worked through the following, I was still in school working part-time. I was working part-time at the documentary at Wolper after school. And so I acquired a little more experience, not much. And the following year, David Wolper sold his company to Metro Media. Okay. And this is at the beginning of the ABC movies of the week. It's like 1969. Yeah. And they acquired a contract to do a job for an ABC movie of the week called Blackwater Gold, which was it was about underwater treasure hunters. Okay. So they were going to shoot in the Bahamas. So because I was already employed in the company, they said, well, we'll take you as a PA on the job, and there was an underwater unit, and with a cinematographer, a guy named Mike Dugan, who owned his own cameras. He said, he needs an assistant, but we don't want to take an extra person to the Bahamas, so you go, and they were still paying me as PA. That's great. He said, you go, and he needs somebody to help with his cameras. Yeah. He owned his own cameras. He had Bell & Howells that he had converted into underwater cameras. So I went as the loader on the. And there was no assistant. Mike did everything. He was like a one-man band. You must have been in heaven. You're going to the Bahamas. Yeah, and he said, "Okay, we're going to the Bahamas." And the underwater unit did some pre-shoots, and because the first unit didn't start until, July 30th, whatever the date was. And I went, Mike showed me how to load the Bell & Howells, and so I would sit in the boat. He'd take cameras, go shoot underwater. they'd bring up the rigs, and I'd basically
Wow.
I'd load the magazines. I was a loader.
You're 21 or 22 at this time, or
Yeah, I was
out of school?
I was yeah.
Yeah,
I was
that's great.
I was a young guy.
That must have been a dream.
Yeah, so I was on the crew. I was a camera assistant, and this was an IA job. It was like, but I of course was not in the IA. And nobody knew who I was or that I was even there.
Yeah, you're in the Bahamas. Yeah,
I was a PA. Who just happened to load magazines. Oh, I have to back up. A little bit.
Okay. By the way, you're not worried at getting out now that it'll affect your career that you did a union show as a non-union?
No, I'm kind of proud of it. I didn't get fired.
All right, I just want to make sure we could say this.
It was an accomplishment. No. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Even more hysterical.
Yeah.
When the job prepped cameras in L.A.
Okay.
And there was the plan was to rent the cameras in L.A., take them to the Bahamas, and go from there. So, but at the time, they had no Panavision was sort of in existence, but they didn't deal with Panavision because it was too expensive, So they had a working relationship with Burns and Sawyer. So the week before the cameras shipped to the Bahamas, the head of production goes to me and says, "Hey, we're prepping the cameras at Burns and Sawyer, but the camera assistants who are going to work in the Bahamas are coming from Canada, and we don't want to bring a camera assistant from Canada to prep the equipment. So you go to Burns and Sawyer and prep the camera." I had never seen a 35 millimeter camera. Go to Burns and Sawyer and prep the cameras. And I said, I
don't know what to do.
Yeah, this is insane. You should get a guy who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
No, it's okay. You go there; they'll show you what to do. So I go there, and the prep tech at Burns and Sawyer is Denny Claremont.
Wow.
So
this is amazing.
So Otto had shown me, basically what was on the shelf at Metro Media.
Yeah.
And I go and I meet Denny Claremont for the first time.
Okay.
I said, "Okay, Denny, how do you do? My name's John Toll. I'm going to prep the cameras, but I've never even seen a 35 millimeter camera, so I have no idea what I'm doing." And he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll show you what to do." It was Denny, right?
That's amazing.
So the cameras that we were getting it was an Area 2C and a BNC rack over.
Oh my gosh.
This was before reflex cameras.
Yeah.
I was really upfront with Denny. I said, "I have absolutely no idea. I've never even seen these cameras, So he says, no, "Don't worry about it." And Burns Sawyer at the time did not rent BNCs. They were an Aeroflex house. They were primarily a documentary. They rented the documentary camera, really low budget films.
So they were sub-renting.
And Denny he himself had never worked on a BNC. He'd seen them, but knew nothing about them.
This is awesome.
And so I go on. The cameras are going to ship on Friday, right? I go on Monday, and Denny checked me out on the Area. It was an Area 2C. He checked me out on the Area, and I was loading magazines. I was changing lenses, and and I did this for a couple of days. And I kept asking about the BNC. He said, "It's coming from MGM, and it's on a job, and so we have to wait for it to come in, and then et cetera, et cetera." So the BNC wasn't accessible. So in the meantime, I concentrated on the Area 2C, and I really had it down. I could load it. I could, follow focus. I could do whatever you had to do.
Yeah.
So finally, the cameras had to ship on Friday afternoon. Thursday afternoon, the BNC was still not there.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, "Denny, what's happening?" And he says, "It's coming in the morning." So the camera shows up Friday morning. And Denny had never worked on it.
I was saying, neither of you know what to do with it.
So Denny we get all the cases off the truck, take them in the workspace. He opens up all the cases, takes everything out of the cases, and spreads it out on the floor. And he's looking for the manual, and he says,
Oh my God.
And I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking for the manual. I've never seen one of these before." So he calls it MGM. They send the manual, and they're going hysterical. The guys at MGM, these are fucking idiots. It's like
this is like the MGM had their own camera department.
It was a full-blown studio.
Yeah,
So
it was one of their cameras.
1969.
Wow.
And So he gets to it, and then he's got everything spread out on the floor. He's got the manual. And this is a rack over BNC, not a reflex BNC.
Yeah.
You know, and it had all the cams and, you know, the finder and
Oh
the
my
cams.
gosh.
And, you know, and if you got the cams wrong, you know, basically, you know, you're not looking through the camera, you're looking through a finder.
Yeah, and actually, just because some people who are listening to that may not know what that is, can you just explain the difference between a rack over and the...
The rack over BNC cameras was, while the camera was rolling, you were not actually looking through the lens. It was a finder on the side of the camera. In order to compose the images correctly, the finder had to be adjusted for the focal length of the lens that was on the camera.
Basically for each lens, right?
Yeah, for each lens, but depending on the focusing distance,
oh my gosh,
the finder would be adjusted by it was called a cam.
Yeah.
It had to have a proper cam that corresponded to the focal length of the taking lens.
And if you're shooting in the Bahamas, you probably wouldn't know for a week later that it wasn't framed correctly, right? Because it's got
no, I mean it was.
You have no way to know.
Or
Unbelievable.
you might never know.
You may never, yeah, unbelievable. Wow.
So because then he was figuring this out, and he was so brilliant that he could, and I was just watching, you know, basically because the whole concept of the cam and the camera and the finder was like a brand new concept, you know, because I'd never actually seen a BNC camera.
And you're figuring this out by looking.
And I
through
was
the
a
manual,
prep tech,
right?
You know.
Oh my gosh.
So, and we were shipping him to the Bahamas, and by the time anybody had discovered if there was an issue, it would be
too late,
fucking disastrous, you know. So he had to figure this out on the day the camera shipped to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just watching because I don't have a clue. I had just seen an Area 2C for the first time that week.
Yeah.
Know? So, and I had that figured out. I could put the lenses on the Area 2C, and you look through the finder, you could actually see what the lens was seeing. You know,
it seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah. At the end of the day, then he says, "Okay, ready to go." I said, "Are you cool?" You know, he says, "Yeah, no problem. Don't worry about it." You know, like of course he wasn't going to the Bahamas, so.
Yeah.
But he was so responsible that he never would have shipped the camera if he didn't feel confident about it. But he was such a great technician that he felt that
that's great.
We were ready to go.
That's amazing.
So we go to the Bahamas. They ship the camera to the Bahamas, and I get there, and I wind up as the AC on the underwater unit with Mike Dugan's basically his homemade cameras. They were Bell & movements, but he had somehow converted it that he could actually use it as a reflex camera.
Yeah.
So we get to the Bahamas, and the director of photography is a guy named Andy Laszlo, who's a New York director of photography.
Okay.
Really nice guy. So because the cameras got there, the 35 millimeter cameras got there early. They were sitting on a truck in the parking lot, and I got there ahead of the camera assistants because the camera assistants were waiting for the first unit to get going. Yeah. So I get there, and they introduced me to Andy as the camera assistant. You know, from the second.
And you're actually the PA, just to be remind everybody.
Yeah, I mean, by that time I knew what my own name was.
Fantastic, yeah.
So Andy, really nice guy. Andy was a great guy. He says, "I'd like to see the 35 millimeter camera package sitting on a truck in the parking lot." Yeah. I said, "Okay, let's go." You know, and so we go, and he says, "Where are the lenses?" And I knew which lens, I knew which case was the lens case.
That's good.
I said, "No," and I pulled it off and said, "Here," and I opened it up. And the prime lenses were Cook lenses, which were kind of, at the time, really cool. You know, It's like, if you had Cook lenses, they were really cool because they were English.
Okay.
You know?
I gotcha. Yeah.
And they weren't Baltar, American. You know, and he looked at me, he says, "Oh, Cook lenses, very good, very good." You know, and it's like, okay, so far so good. And he picks up like the 25 millimeter Cook lens, and he says, "Okay, really cool." And I'm thinking, what if he asked me to put it on the camera? I'm fucked, you know, basically. And so he said, but he was so thrilled the way a Cook lenses, all he needed to do was see it and hold it. You know? And it's like,
that's fantastic.
And he said, very good. Okay, that's cool. I don't need to see anything else. And I'm thinking, okay. done. So the film crew, the 35 millimeter, the main unit film crew, was partly American and partly Canadian. And the first AC was a guy named David Dalzell, who was from L.A. And part of the first unit crew were Canadians. It was a funny kind of deal. I have no idea what the economics of the situation were. But part of the crew was Canadian, part of it was an LA-based crew.
Someone's saving money for some reason, probably.
So the second AC was Canadian. And so the first unit crew, the Americans got there first. The day later, the Canadian showed up. And the Canadian second AC that they had hired changed his mind at the last second and decided he just didn't get on a plane. He didn't tell anybody. He just didn't get on the plane.
Wow.
So the crew shows up, and they're all there except for the second AC. They have no second AC. And they're only about 3 days out of shooting. He says, we have no second AC. And so the production manager says, well, we had this guy who was on the second unit. It was an assistant. So he can be your second. So David says, okay, that's cool. So I meet David, and I said, David, I've never even seen a BNC. I'm really not an assistant. I just worked, around on the documentaries. Yeah. He said, don't worry, I'll show you what to do. So he shows me how to load the Mitchell magazines. I'd never seen a 35 camera. So I was loading the Mitchell 35 millimeter Mitchell magazine, the Airy mags, and I kind of had that down. We set up a dark room. We made in David's hotel's bathroom was my dark room, and I would be on a changing bag if I had to do. I tried to avoid changing while we were on locations. We didn't shoot that much.
Yeah.
So, and I had 6,000-foot mags, so I never really got in a changing bag and changed anything. So we'd wait till we get back, and I'd spend a couple hours, very carefully unloading the 1,000-foot loads and the Airy magazines if we used them. And so I was that was my training.
That's amazing.
And so I was the AC on this TV movie of the week.
And this was what, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or something like that? So,
yeah, 5, 6 weeks. Okay. It was an ABC movie.
That's fantastic. What a great story.
So I became an assistant camera. Yeah. So I was still in college at the time. I was going to college, and this is like a summer job. So we get back, and, there were no mishaps, and I didn't fuck up. I didn't fog any film. And we get back, and I'm back in school, and I'm working part-time at Wolper. And Mike Dugan shows up one day. He says, have you applied to the union? I said, what are you talking about? And he says, well, you work 30 days on a union job. So
you're eligible.
You can get in the union.
It's great.
I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, okay, what do you do? He says, well, you go to the office and tell them, you want to apply. And this was when it was almost impossible to get in the union.
That's what I was going to say. I didn't think it was that easy.
Before all the Alan Davio and Coley Caleb and all these guys sued the unions and opened it up for everybody. Yeah. So I go to the union. I said, I want to sign up. How do I get in the union? He said, no, you have to go through contract services. And what is that? So I figured, and then they tell me what to do. So I applied to contract services, and I'm still in college. Yeah. About 3 months later, I get an appointment to go interview, and I interviewed in front of all these studio reps.
Really?
Yeah. Dick Barlow was head of Paramount Camera Department. There was a guy named Bill Russell who was head of the Universal Camera Department.
This is all the camera departments.
And they're interviewing me, and it's
my gosh.
So they said, well, what's your background, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I worked on this TV movie, and I worked at David Wolper's company as a camera assistant, So I got in the union. And I, with absolutely no experience, as I got in as a camera assistant, and this is when the group system was still in existence. Yeah. So unless you were a group 1, you never worked. It's like the group 2s barely worked, and if you were a group 3, you just sort of like you were not in the film business until you could accumulate enough seniority to become a group 2 and then a group 1. So I got out of college, and because I was theoretically a camera assistant. Yeah. I was hired to work on a non-union job non-union, really low-budget feature for Crown International. So I acquired, because I knew, by this time I knew 35 millimeter Aeroflex cameras from the job in the movies. So I got this job and we did a feature film. I was the first AC. I hired a guy named Chuck Minsky, who was my second, because his dad was an executive at Pacific Theaters, and Chuck got a good job working on a movie, and he had worked on one film as a location scout. And he knew less than I did.
Oh my gosh!
So I kind of I showed Chuck the ropes. I kind of I taught him everything I knew about cameras, which was
That's great.
like
Took
nothing.
an afternoon.
Yeah, right. So I was the first AC. Chuck was the second, and we did this low budget Crown Pictures movie. We got through that, a couple of weeks, and there were no mishaps. We didn't fog any film. We got the film through the camera. I was the first AC, and I had watched David, so I knew, you get the tape measure out, and you figure it out, because the nature of that particular picture was nobody knew what they were doing on the film. It was like low budget filmmaking in the early 70s.
So nobody knew that you didn't know what you were doing.
No, it didn't matter. It was like, because you could breathe, and you could carry the cameras, and that's all you needed to do.
That's great.
So Chuck and I kind of faked our way through it. About halfway through the movie, the director and the DP were not getting along, And so I show up for work one day, and the DP's name was Barry. I said, and Barry wasn't around. I said, "Where's Barry?" "Barry's not coming to work today. He got fired." And so you're the DP.
Oh my God. And just to go back, so this is now your second.
It was basically the second film I ever
Second film you ever worked on.
Other than 16 millimeter documentaries. In the meantime, I've been doing a lot of documentary work, and I've been sort of like sneaking away and playing with the eclairs, and
of course,
looking through it, figured out the zoom lens, and composition. I had a good eye for composition, because I'd always been interested in photography.
Sure.
So I could compose images and not get sent to jail over it. So I wound up as a DP on this low budget movie, and we got through it. It was like, because I had learned how to use a light meter, spectra. You point it this way, you point it that way, and we more or less got through it. So with zero experience, I'd become a camera assistant, then a camera operator DP on a non-union, low-budget film.
That's fantastic.
Even though I was in the union.
Yeah.
Gradually, I was able to work on as a camera assistant on union pictures, because I was in the union, and I met through David. I got recommended to do a television show called The Rookies, because David's father, Archie, was a director of photography, and his brother Dennis was the camera operator on this show, on The Rookies. They had just promoted their second AC to first AC, because the first AC got a better job.
Yeah.
So they were looking for a second.
Okay.
And by this time, I had been around long enough that I could load magazines without fogging film, and I could fill out camera reports. And David said, "I got a guy for you." It's like he's looking for a job, and he'd be great. So they hired me as the second AC on The Rookies, which was really my first full-blown union job, even though I was still low seniority.
Yeah.
I guess it was sort of like TV season, and everybody was working, so I got a job working on a union job as a second AC, which was
That's amazing.
Yeah. And because I had all this vast experience, and I had actually worked as a DP, I kind of knew what Archie was doing. Archie was like this great guy. He'd been around. He started working in the film industry in the 1930s, worked on these Errol Flynn movies, and he had great stories. And so as a second on a TV show at that time, it was absolutely, you did nothing. I worked at 20th Century Fox. We had a loading room, so I didn't load magazines. All I did was sort of hit the slate and change lenses. But because Archie he knew that you had to work really fast, we just put the 10-to-1 zoom on the camera, on the BNC in the morning, and never took it off.
Wow.
If you had to use a prime lens, that was like a big deal.
Yeah.
So for a second, there was absolutely nothing to do. It was like
Okay. Some reports and slating.
Yeah, you sent when 1,000-foot Mitchell mags.
Yeah.
You'd send the loading room at Fox. They would load. You get it back. You hit the slate and you fill out camera reports.
Yeah.
You never change lenses.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing to do. So, and Archie was a great DP, very traditional. He used to sit in his director chair all day long. You know, and he put the chair right behind the camera, and he never moved.
Yeah.
So I would hit the slate, and I kind of hanging out with Archie, and it's
Sure.
like, and he would start telling me war stories about working, with Errol Flynn in the 30s and 40s, and it was great. And he'd show me how to use a spectra, and it was like all the tricks that he had.
Yeah.
So, and I did the show for a whole season. And by that time, I had accumulated enough experience that I could work as AC on my own. I used to practice on. Oh, that was the other thing. During lunch, we'd always leave the camera sitting on the gearhead.
Yeah.
On the dolly. And I'd come back from lunch, and we'd have 15 or 20 minutes of spare. So I'd sit behind the gearhead and learn how to use the whirls.
Wow.
and how to operate. And we had the 10-1 zoom lens that would always stay on the camera.
Yeah.
Never take it off. And so I put on a long lens and use the gearhead and follow people around the stage as they were on there. And that's how I learned to operate, basically.
Was that an old Worrell head or what?
Yeah. It was big,
massive ones.
big, heavy, massive head because, and it was a BNC, pellicle BNC.
Wow.
Because, the equipment was so heavy, you just left it on a belt.
Yeah.
If you didn't have to take it off, you just left it there. So that was basically how my experience in Hollywood filmmaking was sitting, during lunch practicing using the wheels on a BNC pellicle. And
fantastic.
It's crazy. I accumulated enough experience as an AC that I could actually go out and get other jobs. And there's a DP a guy named Jules Brenner.
Okay.
Is this? Do you think this is useful, or am I just rambling?
I'm fascinated by this. If you're okay with it, I'm totally fascinated by it.
I started freelancing as an AC because I had acquired enough experience in between Wolpers and the Blackwater Gold and then the rookies. I could basically get through a day's work without fucking up,
Yeah.
And I started getting calls to do documentaries as an AC.
Huh.
One of the people I worked with was a director of photography named Jules Brenner, and Jules got a job working at Paramount on a TV movie, to shoot a TV movie.
Okay.
So he hired me as the first AC. And I met Dick Barlow. Dick Barlow,
Dick Barlow's name rings a bell.
Dick Barlow was, at the time, he was head of the camera department at Paramount.
Okay.
And then he eventually moved to Warner Brothers, and he was around for a long time. Great guy. So I was recommended to do this TV movie and met Dick Barlow. And the TV movie was like 3 weeks, but I got through it successfully without any major mishaps.
Yeah.
And I got along with Dick really well. He's the head of the camera department. And he offered me to take over a couple of TV shows that were working at Paramount. I said, and by this time I'd been around long enough, and I figured I didn't really want to get involved in TV. I was going to be a feature guy, I was going to be a feature assistant. I didn't want any of the TV stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I said, and I turned it down.
Yeah.
And I said, Dick, I'm kind of doing documentaries, and I'd prefer to be freelancer and not get locked into a TV show.
Yeah.
And I had done a TV show, so I kind of knew what it was.
You just end up there, and that'll be your career.
Yeah,
right?
you got to hold out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he said, okay, well, if something comes up, I'll keep you in mind. So a month later, I get a call from him. He said, we're going to do a feature, and they're looking for a first AC. Are you interested? I said, yeah, this is cool. A feature. Yeah, this is big time. It was like feature film work at Paramount. And the cinematographer was Dick Klein, who was a well-known DP, really very talented guy. His reputation with his crews wasn't the best.
Okay.
And the director was a guy named Michael Winter.
Okay.
Who was really an asshole. This guy was like bad news.
Yeah.
So
that's not a good.
Michael Winter is the director. Dick Klein, who his reputation was kind of tough on his crews, was the DP. But I didn't know any of this. All I knew was it was like a feature film. It was like, hey, this is cool, man. I was like...
Big time.
So I go to Panavision, the show's prepped at Panavision.
Yeah.
I go to Panavision to start prepping, and it was all these really well-known, talented first ACs out there prepping.
Yeah.
And who I didn't know any of them because I was not in in that circle. And so I got to meet these guys, and Bob Martin was one of them. It was like really fantastic first class first AC. And he says, "Well, hi, how you doing? Blah blah blah. What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing this feature at Paramount." And he said, "Oh, cool." I said, "Who's the director of photography?" He said, "Dick Klein." And he goes, "No, who's the director?" "Michael Winter."
I see where this is going.
Okay, and it's like all of a sudden, like
he knows
this poor guy. He's dead, So and I didn't know any of this. So I prepped the cameras. It was the Panafix camera had just come out. It was a brand new camera.
Wow.
So we had a PSR and a Panaflex. And Bobby Odessa was the B camera second. He had been recommended to me. So we start the movie, and it was kind of cool. I discovered that Michael Winter is like not a very pleasant guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He hated camera operators.
Oh.
The first camera operator we had on the show was John Flynn.
John Flynn.
Yeah, nice guy. Great guy. But Michael Winter didn't like the way he looked. It's like, and he fired him after a week.
Oh,
so no fault of John. John was doing a great job.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Michael Winter just didn't like him. John, John's kind of a rough kind of guy, deep voice. Didn't like him. He was too manly.
Oh, God.
And we went through about 4 or 5 operators, and I met. So on this job, I met John, Tommy Lockridge, Bill Johnson. These guys are all very experienced, talented operators.
Yeah.
And this is my first feature, and I'm faking my way through it. And I'm meeting these guys, and it was all of a sudden, these guys knew what they were doing, and they're really professional, members of the camera crew. So it was like a great exposure for me. I acquired a huge amount of information and actually learned how to be a member of a camera crew.
Sure.
And for some reason, I got along with Michael Winter okay.
Yeah.
And he didn't fire me. Because Michael Winter didn't fire me, I got along with Dick Klein.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
And he didn't fire me. So, and in the process, the fact that I was actually able to finish the job with these guys meant quite a bit to Dick Barlow, who was head of the Paramount Camera.
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, I've got some other work coming up, and if you're interested, let me know." But it was all television work, and I knew that wasn't what I didn't want to get involved in that kind of work.
Yeah.
Because in the meantime, I was starting to get other jobs as assistant freelancing.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I'd rather stay freelance and see what happens, which is what I did. And eventually I got a call to do B camera on this movie that John Alonzo was going to shoot called Black Sunday.
Yeah.
That John Frankenheimer was directing.
Oh, John Frankenheimer.
And they were going to use A and B cameras, and they didn't have a B camera assistant.
Yeah.
So Dick called me to do that, and so I did that. And I met John, and Ray Villalobos, who was the A camera assistant.
Wow.
So that was how I kind of like broke into features in terms of my experience as an assistant cameraman. So I stayed with John, and John eventually moved me up to operator, and that's when I started operating with John and stayed there for a couple of years and started to meet other people and eventually worked as an operator with other DPs.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing story. That was fascinating. Do you remember when you made the jump? I mean, granted, it sounds like John, you had a friend there as well as the director, and he was kind of looking out for you. Do you remember what was that? Was jumping on as the operator suddenly? Like, what was the hardest part of making that transition? Because it sounds like you worked out on the wheels and.
Well, I mean, being able to see through the camera because I couldn't keep my right eye open long enough. That was one challenge.
Yeah.
But what really made it work was the fact that I was working with a director of photography who I had experience with as an assistant.
Yeah.
Right? And Black Sunday, which was a movie about a Super Bowl game.
Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I remember this.
It was Robert. It was on TV recently. I just watched it again.
Was it with a blimp? Was there a blimp?
Yeah, there was very complicated.
Like a terrorist
story.
something.
Bruce Dern was an ex-Navy pilot during the Vietnam War who had gotten, had some emotional problems.
Okay.
For some reason, he got involved with Arab terrorists, and there was a plot to load the Goodyear blimp with darts and blow it up over the Super Bowl game that happened in Miami, in Super Bowl 10, which actually was a real game.
Yeah.
And so that was the plot of the story.
Yeah.
Photographically, what needed to happen was to basically create background footage during a real Super Bowl game,
Sure.
which happened to be Super Bowl 10. And by this time, I had, because of my experience at Paramount with Dick Barlow, Dick recommended me to John to be the B camera assistant on this job. Ray Villalobos was the first camera AC, who I had also met at Paramount. Chris Schwiebert was the camera operator, and I became the B camera second, or B camera first, because the whole plot is based on having the Goodyear blimp loaded with poison darts blow up during the game. We shot during the real Super Bowl game, Super Bowl 10, in Miami. And we had something like 8 camera crews, And this is all Panavision anamorphic lenses, it was a big deal. Yeah. This is the first thing we shot in the schedule.
Sure. What was the Super Bowl? You mean
it was the actual Super Bowl 10 game that happened.
Wraparound footage.
At the Orange Bowl in Miami.
Yeah.
And we went, and there were like 8 camera crews.
Wow.
And it was just on TV recently, and I just watched it.
I can't believe it was on TV. That's amazing. How did it hold up?
Well, everything's on TV. Because
that's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
So, and it's been on more than once in the last few years.
Just so I understand, so the idea was there are poison darts in
well, I don't know if they're poison, but they're people. The idea was because they're Arab terrorists.
Yeah.
And Bruce Dern had gone crazy in Vietnam as a pilot, and I think he'd been captured. Whatever. He fell in love with one of the Arab terrorists' women.
Okay, of course.
And that's how they had kind of recruited him. And as the pilot of the Goodyear blimp, they knew that if they loaded the Goodyear blimp with darts, I don't know if they weren't poison, they were just darts, and blew it up, and they flew into the stadium during the game and blew it up, they could kill thousands of people.
Thousands of people. It's a very convoluted idea.
But in order to do this, we had to shoot during the game, during the actual Super Bowl game. Yeah. And John Frankenheimer, because they never did anything small, we had to have 10 camera crews, of course, right? And it was all anamorphic. So I was hired. I was introduced to John. John said, "Okay, you be the B camera AC." And Ray and I prepped it. Altus Panavision equipment. We had 10 cameras that we took to Miami, and we prepped it in. There were 10 crews.
Amazing.
So John, who used to love to operate, and because of the nature of the work, it was all sort of, and he had been a documentary cameraman in his previous life. So he needed to be close to John Frankenheimer. So John operated the A camera. I was the B camera assistant with a camera operator named Chris Schwiebert, who was a great camera operator. Yeah. We had 2 cameras. Had a Mark II and an Arri 2C. And we sat up on top of a 5-ton truck that was parked just outside the end zone. Wow. In the Orange Bowl. And we were basically photographing plays, because we needed
the footage.
So in the second half, I was really getting bored. It was like because we were. So the Mark II was sitting up on top of the truck with us, and so I asked Chris if he minded if I set up the Mark II, and just have it ready in case something else would happen. Like it was just a high-speed camera. So it was the Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay. And Dallas had the ball, and they progressed down towards our end of the field. Yeah. And because we had the second camera set up, I asked Chris, I said, "Do you mind if I roll on some of these plays?" And we had a 50-500 zoom on the camera. So I got on Mark II and 50-500 zoom, and I just zoomed in all the way on Roger Staubach. He was the
Roger Staubach.
Yeah, he was the quarterback. Yeah. So I left out a good part. Okay. Because of all this documentary work that I had done, because I had no seniority in the union, I could never work on a union job. I never had enough seniority to do it.
You weren't getting called
because of my relationship with Denny Claremont. Denny would recommend me to people who came into Burns and Sawyer, and one of the guys who came into Burns and Sawyer was a guy named Saul Layton, from New York who had contracts to shoot recruiting films for the military.
Ah, okay.
And so I would go out as an AC
Yeah.
on these military recruiting jobs, and we went to like Fort Benning, Georgia, and places like that. And Fort Benning, Georgia, was a U.S. Army Ranger training facility, and one of the training exercises they had was rappelling down a tower, and they had like a tower. They built a tower that was like 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
You know? And these guys who were in Ranger school would go up and rappel down the 50-foot tower. And the working relationship that I had with Saul Layton was worked as a director DP because there was no budget for anybody else, and I was the AC. And so we go on these jobs, and Saul was not a very athletic guy, and he was very wary about getting into any hazardous situations. So if there was anything that he felt uncomfortable about, he would give me the opportunity to be the camera operator.
The opportunity.
And because I was kind of like, I was enthusiastic, and I wanted as much experience as possible.
Absolutely.
So can you go up the 50-foot tower and give me a shot of those guys? You just get out over the edge and just give me a shot of those guys rappelling down.
And of course, this is with no headsets or anything, so you just went up there and did it.
Yeah. I went with the grip, you know, and it's like, and he'd hang onto my belt, and, you know, he'd do all that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And I was young and stupid, and said, it's cool. This is really great experience.
Sure.
We do that, and the following job he had, we went to Army paratroop school, and he said, we need a shot of them going out the door, you know. So would you mind getting up? They used to fly C-130s.
Oh, in the plane. You're jumping out of the plane, you mean?
Yeah, he said, get up next to the door and get the guys going out. You know, get a close-up of their... These are guys doing their first jump.
Yeah.
And get a close-up of the guys going out. You know, let's see all the emotion on their face. I said, yeah, cool, okay. And we had... And if you got into the plane, you had to wear a parachute.
Okay,
you know?
just in case.
Being a visual guy, I knew that a really cool shot would be to get a close-up of these guys just before they jump, you know, on their first jump.
Yeah.
These are guys in
the fear
school.
in the face or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever it was.
Whatever.
So, but in order to do that, you had to get up next to the door, right, which of course is open.
Almost outside the door. Yeah.
But I had Clarence Tyndall, who was a grip, and I said, okay, just hold on my belt, you know, and make sure, don't let me fall out, right? And I got some really great stuff.
I'm sure.
You know? But if you've never been in that situation, you learn that in paratrooper school, when they jump, there's a flight of 3 or 4 planes, and unless you're in the very first plane, the turbulence from the other planes creates, you know, it creates a lot of turbulence. So we were like in the 4th plane. Yeah. And the plane was bouncing, you know, it's incredible turbulence. So it's not a smooth flight. So Clarence was basically holding on to me, holding on to my belt, holding on to something inside the plane to keep himself on the plane. So, and I'm excited about, I'm getting these great close-ups, these guys just before they jump, and one guy jumps, and then it becomes a close-up of another guy, and so you get all these incredible expressions about these guys about to jump for the first time. You know, so I accumulated a huge amount of experience as an operator where I barely knew what I was doing as an assistant cameraman. You know, and it was because we were doing these sort of real-life documentaries. You know? So the Black Sunday story, that I kind of knew how to handle a camera because of all this military experience. Sure. Back to Black Sunday, Pittsburgh Steelers are like on the 20-yard line, and we're sitting on the roof of a 5-ton truck that's parked in the end zone, right? And so I set up the 50 to 500 anamorphic zoom in all the way on Roger Staubach. Yeah. He gets the ball and he fades back, and I knew he was going to pass. Yeah. And it was so obvious he's looking for his receiver. I said, fuck, if he throws the ball, I'm never going to hold the ball and frame on a 500-millimeter lens. Yeah. So he rears back, he gets ready to fire, and I got my hand on the zoom. And as soon as he throws, I zoom out and tip down. You know, I could barely see through the camera. Yeah. And when I open my eye, there's a receiver standing in the end zone holding the ball, right? So I photographed this touchdown during the Super Bowl game. And prior to the game, John Frank and I, were the director, had said, okay, guys, he says, I'm really, he's talking to all the operators. He says, I really want some good stuff. So, don't roll on anything unless it's going to be a completed pass or a touchdown, and everybody's looking at me, how the fuck do we know it's going to be a completed pass? So I photographed a completed pass and a touchdown in one shot.
That's great.
And I was the first AC,
Yep.
it was like,
Yep.
So we're watching dailies, and like 3 days later, the shot comes up, and it's like a completed pass and a touchdown. And it was the B camera, when Chris was the operator.
Yeah.
And Frank and I said, Chris, great shot. Fantastic. Chris says, I don't think I did that. I think he did it, It's like, so from that point on, I was like a potential operator in John's mind and John Frankenheimer's mind.
Great.
John Frankenheimer actually came to me. He says, that was great fucking work. It's like, next job I get, you're the operator. So of course I never saw John Frankenheimer again. Yeah.
So can you tell me about working on Peggy Sue Got Married with Francis Ford Coppola?
I met Jordan working on a commercial.
Jordan Cronenworth?
Yeah, Jordan Cronenworth. And I didn't know Jordan. And I have to tell this story because it's
I love these stories. These are great. If you don't mind.
So when I first started working as the first AC, I was working commercials and TV movies and whatever came along. And I met a director cameraman, a guy named Melvin Sokolsky, who had been a very well-known fashion still photographer in New York. And he started shooting commercials. So I got along really well with Melvin because I was interested in photography and he was a photographer. And he had his own unique way of working, And Melvin had 2 Area 2Cs that he owned, and we just sort of kept him handy, and he would operate handheld, and I would follow focus, and I would never pull out a tape, and I was just good, like, and then somehow I managed to stay in focus. So Melvin always thought that I knew my way around, Once I started operating, I stopped being Melvin's AC, and his son Bing became the first.
Okay.
Melvin got a job doing a Dr. Pepper commercial, and because he was a commercial director. There was a Fred Astaire movie, something about the wedding, I forget, where people danced on the ceiling. They had a revolving...
Royal wedding? Royal wedding?
Yeah, royal wedding.
I think so, yeah.
And people danced on the ceiling. They had a revolving room.
Revolving room, right?
And people could dance on the ceiling. Yep. So the concept for this Dr. Pepper commercial is the same concept. What was involved? It was very complicated. They had to build a set inside a drum that would revolve, because the whole set wouldn't revolve.
Yeah.
And people could dance up the wall and dance on the ceiling. So Melvin got this job, and he knew Jordan Cronenworth from other jobs. He respected Jordan. Jordan was an incredible DP. Mm-hmm. So Melvin hired Jordan, and he hired me because he knew me as a camera operator to be the operator.
Okay.
And I didn't know what I was getting into until the first day of shooting, And Jordan had a regular operator, but who wasn't available. So Jordan said, yeah, fine, we'll get this other guy. So we showed up, and in order to photograph the people dancing across the ceiling, they had to build a rig where the camera rig and the room revolved around at the same time.
At the same time, sure.
Yeah, so it was a very complicated rig with a sort of an extension. The extension was built off the revolving room.
Wow.
So the camera, which was on a dolly, there was a dolly too. So
my gosh.
The camera had to dolly in during the shot.
While it's turning.
Yeah. So Melvin had sort of designed this and got somebody to build it. We had a rig where the camera was mounted on a sort of a dolly that was designed on rails, and it could operate. I don't even know what the technology was.
Yeah.
It would dolly in and out as the room was revolving.
Upside down and everything. Yeah.
So basically, what it meant was that you had to operate and do a move to tilt and pan while you were upside down.
While you were upside down.
Yeah. And Bing was Melvin's son, the director's son, who became the first AC when I started operating.
Oh, okay. So he moved up. Yeah.
So Bing and I are seated on this dolly that rotates 180 or 360 degrees
Yeah.
during the shot.
Are you strapped on then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, completely strapped in.
Yeah.
Unable. All I could
Harnesses.
do is sort of bend at the waist, barely keep my eye in the eyepiece, and because the shot was so complicated, Melvin worked as he used to light his own sets, and I sort of worked as his assistant, sort of assistant DP / first AC. But he hired Jordan Cronowith to
DP.
light the set. It was so the shot was so complicated. So I met Jordan
Yeah.
on this shot,
Okay.
and because the shot was so complicated, Jordan felt I was competent as an operator.
Sure.
So after that, I started working with Jordan on commercials, and then did 2 feature films with him.
Uh-huh.
And one was Peggy Sue Got Married, and Francis Coppola was the director.
Yeah.
And which worked out great, And so that was sort of my introduction to feature filmmaking.
Yeah.
Through Jordan.
Wow. And Francis Ford Coppola. That's
Yeah,
quite
and
an
Francis.
introduction.
Yeah. And so based on that, I started getting other calls to do other work as an operator. Some with Alan Davio.
Uh-huh.
I'm Alan. I mean, you sure this is good? I mean, am I boring the shit out of you?
You're not boring. This. I love this, but if you're happy talking about it, I think it's fascinating.
No, it's good because I mean, it's actually kind of interesting because
These are fascinating stories to me, and I think a lot of people.
Because I became a really competent operator
Yeah.
based on working with really other competent people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
John Alonzo was one, and then Alan and other people.
Yeah. What was working with Coppola like?
Well, it was good. I mean, it was great because I'm not sure how Jordan got that job. Based on the revolving room commercial.
Yeah.
I started working with Jordan on commercials,
Uh-huh.
and then he was hired to do a film called Buckaroo Banzai.
Buckaroo Banzai.
And the director really loved Jordan. The producer was David Beagleman.
Okay.
Not a nice guy.
All right.
And he was very heavy-handed with the director. Jordan got fired as a way to control the director.
Oh.
Yeah, because Jordan was working for the director, and
Producer didn't like that.
it just as a divisive technique.
It's a crappy
David
industry.
Beagleman fired Jordan, and of course, I was his operator, and of course we all went, and Bing was his assistant,
Yep.
and we all left, which was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. And but I was working with Jordan on commercials because he was directing commercials, and also other features that he got. So, and when he got fired on Buckaroo Banzai, he got hired to shoot Peggy Sue Got Married with Francis.
Uh-huh.
And I was, by this time, I had accumulated quite a bit of experience as an operator, so I kind of knew what I was doing as an operator.
Yeah.
And got along with Francis really well. And Peggy Sue, the actors were Kathleen Turner and Nick Cage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I thought Nick Cage was hysterically funny, in that picture. One of these sequences in the film was Peggy Sue as a teenager and her girlfriends in her bedroom.
Okay.
And we were shooting on location in Santa Rosa. And Jordan, who was a brilliant cinematographer,
Yeah.
had chosen this one particular house and this room at the house based on the position of the sun in the afternoon.
Okay.
Because he wanted sunlight coming through the windows, and he couldn't afford to, for condors. And
Yeah.
So he said, okay, we're going to shoot available light during the 90 minutes when there's actually sun coming through the windows.
Yeah.
And so because Francis likes to take his time, and the actors like to take their, we were in danger of losing the sun.
The window. Yeah.
And if the light didn't come through the windows, then there was no shot, basically. So Jordan says, okay, just take the camera, get in the room, and no rehearsal, they're going to improvise a shot. And the light's going to be beautiful, just point the camera in the right direction, which was what we did. So, and it all worked out. It worked out great, And after that, I had a good working relationship with Francis.
Mm-hmm.
A few years later, I'm ready to move up to DP.
Yeah.
And I started shooting commercials.
Okay.
One of the directors that I started working with was Carol Ballard.
Oh, Carol Ballard. Yeah.
Yeah, who was a feature black stallion, never quite well, really
Yeah.
well-known films, visually interesting films.
Yeah.
And so I started working with him as a DB on commercials. And we did a commercial in New England. On the way back, I get on the plane, and Carol and I happen to be on the same flight. And so we sit together on the flight, and he was getting ready to prepare a movie about America's Cup yacht racing that he was going to direct. And at this point, I'd only shot commercials as a DP.
Mm-hmm.
And Carol started telling me about this film that he was going to direct about America's Cup yacht racing, shooting on 12-meter yachts,
Oof.
and how cool it was going to be, And he implied that he was going to go to New Zealand. He implied he already had a director of photography lined up. And I thought, well, that's cool because that's going to be a bitch, because my experience on boats had not been particularly great,
Yeah.
In terms of seasickness. And I said,
Okay.
man, this can be fucking hard. It's like whoever is going to shoot that is going to be really got their work cut out.
Yeah.
So there's a flight from Boston to L.A.
Okay.
And for 5 hours. And Carol's telling me all about his plans for the shoot. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's going to be great, knowing that there's no fucking way that I would be able to shoot it because of my experience on boats had been not pleasant. So, and I kept telling Carol, that sounds great, man, really good. So 2 months later, I got a call on New Year's Eve from Tom Letty, the producer, and say, hey, Carol's going to shoot this movie in Australia, and he's wondering if you like to get involved, And I, without thinking, I said, Carol, yeah, great, that's cool, And I hung up, and knowing that, wait a minute, that's wind. And it's like 12-meter yachts, and you can sailboat racing, and I don't do well on sailboats. So I figured, oh fuck it, we'll give it a go and see what happens. And Carol's a great guy, incredible director and
very visual,
really
right?
good cinematographer, So I signed up. I said, okay, we're going to do it. And what about seasickness? And I said, well, we'll figure it out. If I get sick, then they'll fire me and get somebody else. And so we go to Australia, the west coast of Australia, which is 3,000 miles from Sydney.
Yeah.
And the cameras we're using, Carol owned Eclair CM3 cameras.
Okay.
He owned 3 of them. And because of his experience, he had when he first became a filmmaker, he used to shoot documentaries himself. He used to go out as a one-person crew with his own cameras and shoot these documentaries for the U.S. government. So he was a very experienced cinematographer,
Yeah.
And because he loved the CM3 cameras. Are you familiar with them?
I don't remember them, no.
Well, nobody else does, and there's good reason, because they're really, they're theoretically the first 35 millimeter handheld camera. But they weren't really handheld,
like it wasn't.
Because they don't fit on your shoulder. They kind of like, you have to hold them. And, the only person I ever met who liked them is Caleb and Carol. And Caleb used to work with Carol.
There you go.
That's where he was introduced to.
Yep.
So Carol says, we're going to use the CM3s. They're going to be fine. So we get there and we start doing tests. And the CM3 is not. I mean, I've done a lot of handheld work. The CM3 is not conducive to really handheld. The only thing is it's light enough you can actually hold it. And that's the only reason it was a handheld camera. It didn't fit on your shoulder. It's like it's incredibly awkward. So we get out and we start doing some tests. We would always have to wear life vests when we're on the boats because the 12-meter yachts are very exposed. They're wet boats, and the reason they're called a wet boat is because there's always water coming
over the top. I gotcha.
Yeah, you're always wet. So I'm wearing an inflatable life vest. It inflates if you get wet. It doesn't inflate unless it gets wet. And
this is cool.
Holding the camera, and there's a great shot of. On the low side, we're going upwind, boats really heeling over. And on the low side, and I'm really getting a great shot of one of the sailors. And we hit a wave, and I got completely inundated by this wave. The life vest inflates. you know, and I'm just holding the CF3 partially on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I feel the camera go whoop up over my head.
Wow.
And it's because the life vest inflated.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I had got hit by the wave. I was down on the deck, and I'm looking, and all these sailors, all these professional sailors, were in hysterics. It was like the funniest thing they'd ever seen in their life. I'm fucking laying in a puddle of water with the camera up over my head, the life vest inflated, and they said, "This is never going to work." In the meantime, we'd been looking for 35 millimeter 8-ton cameras because they had just been invented. There were only about 10 of them in existence everywhere in the world. And so we finally were able to acquire two 35 millimeter 8-tons.
Yeah, fantastic.
Which made the whole
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was like, are you familiar with the camera?
Oh yeah, it was perfectly ergonomic.
And it was like
hook that fit over your shoulder.
From my experience at Wolper, I knew the 16 millimeter eclair, and and how handy it was in terms of a handheld camera. And, and the 35 was designed by Jean-Pierre Beauvois, who had designed the 16 millimeter eclair.
Okay.
So it was like,
made sense
compared to any other handheld camera. Like, I'd go into Panavision and they refused to rent me the cameras because they knew that salt water would destroy them. Was it the Elaine? Was that the
Elaine? That's right.
Yeah, and Phil Radin told me that we can't rent you the camera because the salt water will kill the camera. So the Eclair was the only camera potentially we could use, and we were able to acquire 3 of them after literally searching all over the planet. So based on the one experience I had with the self-inflated life vest, I was able to talk Carol into going out of her way to get the 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
And so we shot that movie. And that was my first feature as a DP.
What movie was that? What was it?
It's called Wind.
Wind.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was about America's yacht racing. Not a successful film commercially, but really interesting to look at.
Yeah.
And we shot on board the 12-meter yachts in really rough conditions.
Yeah.
In Australia, and then we were working on the west coast of Australia, but the weather there for sailing was very conditional. And during the winter months, it was ideal sort of sailing conditions. But that only lasted for 8 or 10 weeks. There was a delay in getting the picture underway because of financing. We sort of missed the window of opportunity for the weather, and we ran out of wind, basically.
Oh my gosh! Oh, because it just stops and then you.
Yeah, it's seasonal. It was seasonal.
I got you.
And it stopped. And so every day we go out, and every day there'd be less and less wind. And we started late because the wind season was like November to February. We didn't get going until January. So we ran out of wind. And one day, producer comes to us and says, "We're going to have to leave Australia because we have no wind, and there's no, we're moving about."
It doesn't work.
Sailboats racing.
Yeah.
With no wind, the boats don't go. And in the meantime, the guys who were sailing the boats were all professional sailors. I mean, and they really knew what they were doing.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So we had a meeting one day, and they said, "Well, we have to go somewhere else in the world where there's wind." And he said, well, one guy said, well, east coast of Africa, it would be pretty good. I mean, and they were seriously considering going, And another guy said, well, the Mediterranean's pretty good, this time of year. One of the sailors had been on Dennis Connor's America's Cup yacht racing teams. He says, we trained in Hawaii, and in the Molokai Channel, there's always wind, So they said, okay, let's check it out. In the meantime, there was shooting schedule for Newport, Rhode Island, and Wendover, Utah. They said, okay, let's go to Rhode Island and Utah. In the meantime, we'll figure out where in the world we're going to go shoot the racing, which turned out to be Hawaii in the Molokai Channel. And we go and we shoot, which is traditional 35 millimeter feature filmmaking, sort of the story part of the movie.
Yep.
And at the end of the movie, we go to Hawaii and shoot the racing, which it's still one of my favorite films that I've ever worked on.
I'll have to check it out.
And really, well, nobody's seen it.
Yeah, now I'll look.
Because it was unsuccessful in the theaters.
Yeah.
And they pulled it. It was a TriStar movie. And they pulled it after about 3 weeks.
Huh.
And the only people in the world who have ever seen this movie are sailors.
Sailors. I was just going to say, I have a friend, I guarantee you. I'll mention it to him. He'll know.
I've run into people sailors, members of yacht clubs, who go see the movie like once a week.
That's their
They
film.
show it at the yacht club.
Yeah.
Because the sailing is so good.
That's great.
The sailing is incredible.
Oh, I'll put it on my list. Absolutely. That's fantastic.
And the movie's got some... the story is a little weak, but it's a beautiful looking film.
Yeah.
It was my first feature film as a DP.
That's great.
I'm really very proud of it, But it was such a unique sort of filmmaking experience.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's
it was
fantastic.
And it was sort of... Actually, that film got me my second job as a DP, which was Legends of the Fall.
Legends of the Fall was your second job as a DP?
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's
Second
incredible.
feature, yeah. But it was because I had been recommended to Ed Zwick, and I can't remember why,
Okay.
For some reason. It was because the AD on Legends of the Fall was a guy named Pat Crowley,
Oh, Pat
who
Crowley, yeah.
became a producer.
Yeah.
But I had worked as a camera operator on 3 consecutive movies with Pat Crowley
Okay.
As an AD. And so he knew me as an operator. One was with director John Schlesinger, one was with Carol Rice,
Yeah.
and another one, a Mary Tyler Moore movie that I did with Jordan. So I'd done three films with Pat.
Yeah.
Pat became a producer on Legends of the Fall, and they were looking for a DP. So he recommended me to Ed
That's
Zwick.
amazing.
And I met Ed, and I don't actually know how I got the job, because it was like my second film was a DP, and it was a big movie. Brad Pitt, Julia Ormond. It was a relatively big movie.
Was it daunting to go from for your second movie into something that big?
No, because of all my experience as an operator.
Okay.
Because I had done so many
That's true.
pictures
You work
as an
with
operator.
Coppola. You work with
I worked with Francis, and
Yeah.
so I wasn't intimidated by the idea.
Yeah.
It was the specifics of that particular picture, because it was in Canada, in Calgary. I could only bring part of my crew, and I got the script, and I was very familiar. I was familiar with the story. It was a Jim Harrison novel, novella really, and I knew what the potential for the film was, but it was basically because I wanted to shoot all available light as much as possible and time of day, and so I knew what that film needed. I knew what it needed to be, and how to shoot it. It was a question of basically trying to convince people to shoot it that way, because I just wanted to shoot primarily available light.
So it's all about scheduling, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and so I met Ed, and I took a book there was a book called The Vanishing Breed, which was a book National Geographic still photographer had accumulated all his work, still photographs of cowboys at work.
Oh, wow.
Which was shot all available light at different times of day, and it was a really great book, incredibly visual. And I took it, and I had a meeting with Ed, and I took it to Ed, and I said, "Here's what your movie should look like." And he said, "Well, how do you do that?" I said, "Well, you shoot all natural light. You have to just be at the right place at the right time of day, and shoot that way." So I got the job. So I had to basically, after I got the job, I had to figure out how to convince everybody else that we were only going to shoot afternoons, magic hour. The whole schedule had to be based on the time of day, not what was convenient for production. We go to work, and I go to Canada, and the first AD that was on the movie, I presented this idea to Ed, and Ed said, "That's great. That's what we're going to do." So the first AD quit. Says you can't shoot that way. You have to go to morning. You have to go to work at 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
Go home at 6 and whatever it was. I said no. We have to work around time of day, about the light.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden he comes in one day and he said, "There's an emergency in my family and I have to leave." So he left, he quit, he got a job on another film, And so they hired a guy who was from Canada, first AD from Canada, who was not particularly well experienced. And he lasted a couple of weeks. We were still not shooting it. We're still in prep. And they hired a guy, a first AD named Nilo Otero, who I knew from when I had been an operator and he'd been a second. Great guy. He had become a very successful first. So he came in, and he was like a troubleshooter, and he said, and he was ready to go to work, and come on, let's get it done. I said, Neil, I'd like to shoot, in this window of time, we're going to shoot afternoons and magic hour.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to shoot the movie.
Yeah.
He said, okay, let's do that. So, and he convinced the producer, and so everybody said, okay, let's do that. We'll see, we'll give it a go. Give it a week or two and see what happens. And so we started scheduling the movie around the light, not what was convenient for production.
Yep.
And that was the story of Legends of the Fall. So we started shooting, and everybody liked the way it looked, and it created massive problems for production. I mean, it was just...
I'm sure.
But Nilo and Pat were able to, they worked it out, and
it's amazing.
They were very supportive,
Wow.
and which was a great lesson to me. It's like, DP is going to have the best intentions in the world, but unless you have support from production, you're fucked.
Absolutely.
Basically, and which is what happened on Legends.
Wow, that's amazing. It shows. There's no question. As a cinematographer, what do you look for in operators? What qualities do your operators you like them to have?
Attitude and skill.
Can you expound on that?
Well, because of my experience as an operator, I have a low tolerance for bullshit, and because I worked as an operator with really good directors of photography, and none of them had the same sort of working style. It was all different style. So as an operator, I always adjusted to whatever it was the director, but however the director of photography wanted to work, I adjusted to that.
Yeah.
But with my own sort of unique take on it, and somehow we would always find a balance.
Yeah.
But I never tried to bullshit anybody.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's what I expect as an operator.
That's great. Okay.
And because of my experience as an operator, I can see through the bullshit in the second.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Just be honest. And do you expect them to? I mean, obviously you have your ideas of the shot. Do you expect them to bring sort of version of it? Because there's some DPs who I want X, Y, and Z, and they want X, Y, and Z. But there's some DPs who say, this is the general feeling.
Because of my experience as an operator, and I would make suggestions, and they would either go with my suggestions or not.
Yeah.
But
what do you look for in a B? If you have an A and a B camera operator, what do you look for in the B camera operator? Because the A camera operator is obviously
someone who
running things, but
doesn't talk much and does what they're told.
Okay. And do you expect them to be looking for shots, or
Yeah. Because I would expect anybody who's got anything to do with creating content to have ideas and suggestions. That doesn't necessarily mean that I would either agree with that attitude or disagree with it because it wasn't my idea.
Sure.
The worst possible thing a director of photography can do is reject an idea because it's not their own idea. So I would expect an operator to have really good ideas, good suggestions, and not get their feelings hurt if I didn't accept the idea.
That's phenomenal, and it's so great to hear because not everybody has that.
Yeah, I mean, if they come up with a better idea, then I'm happy to accept it because I'll take full credit for it.
Of course,
if it works, and if it doesn't, it's their fucking problem.
And that's why you're the DP.
I mean, it's
And what operators who are sort of coming up? Is there any specific advice you can give them as far as, I mean, you mentioned, skill and attitude, but anything specific for an up-and-coming operator from someone like yourself?
Yeah. Watch. Don't talk more than you have to. Uh-huh. Don't get your feelings hurt if nobody goes for your ideas.
I like that a lot, actually, because that's especially when you're first starting out and you're questioning whether you know what you're doing. To have something shot down is tough.
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt for an operator to look for confirmation that what they're doing is good.
Yeah. What's your suggestion? Not that this ever happens. When an operator has the DP saying we want to do this and the director saying we want to do that, and they don't meet in the middle.
Well, then the director and the DP need to have a conversation. It's not the operator's problem.
I like that.
And it's like, or the operator can go to the DP and say, I know what you're saying, but the director wants this. What do you want to do about it?
What do you want to do? Yeah. It's a tough position to be in. Did you ever find yourself in those positions?
I'm trying to think, and I probably did, but I can't give you.
That's you probably wiped it like I have. Do you remember any times as an operator where you just completely failed? You couldn't get a shot. You couldn't, or I mean, there's always for me, there's always, I never get it to my liking.
No, because I was experienced enough to know whether I could do it or not.
Gotcha.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, the upside down Dr. Pepper commercial.
Well, that's a whole.
Was I had no fucking idea if I could pull that.
Is that viewable? Is that on the internet somewhere? Because I'm going to look.
Well, it's. I did see it recently, but it was sort of a demonstration of something.
Yeah.
But it's a Dr. Pepper commercial we shot in, I don't know, early 80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to look for it because it sounds fascinating. So one thing you touched on a couple times that actually a lot of people who might listen to this may have no concept of, and I got the tail end of. Can you just talk about what it was like being an operator and coming in the morning and watching dailies and that experience? Because most people don't have that now. Was it stressful?
I was more curious than anything, you know.
Okay.
Because when at the end of the day, I would have a pretty good idea of, well, that's going to look good, or that's really, you know, that's going to be messy. And I had a habit of going to labs along with directors of photography and seeing stuff in the morning, you know.
Okay.
It's like, I think probably the best example of walking away not having a clue whether the work was working or not. It was working in a film with George Miller. Did we talk about that?
No. I didn't know you worked with.
I was with Alan Davio. Got a job doing after E.T. 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone movie.
Oh wow. Okay.
The Twilight Zone movie had 4 directors.
Yeah.
One of the directors was Stephen.
Yep.
He did one of the segments, and the other was with George Miller, Australian director George Miller. And George had done Road Warrior.
Yep. Did he do the kick the can? What episode? Did you remember the story? Which one it was?
It was the monster on a wing.
Oh, the plane, Terror at 10,000 feet, or whatever
right.
it was. Yeah, okay.
With John
Originally William Shatner in the original.
John Lithgow.
Yep.
And this is George. George had never done a movie here, and so he was hired to do the Man on the Wing episode. And Alan, because of E.T., was hired by Stephen, and so Alan got to do the Man on the Wing with George.
Just that segment of it, or the whole movie?
No, there were 4 segments.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different
Alan
cinematographer for each.
George and Stephen's.
I see. Okay.
Segment,
and
Joe Dante and John Landis did the other 2.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And they were in the tragic accident.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
part of that.
Absolutely.
So we did George's segment before Stephen's, and by this time, Alan, I had a history with Alan, and I had done some work on ET, and
you were an operator at this point for Alan.
Yeah.
Okay.
I met Alan.
Yeah.
I met Alan when he first got into the camera union on a TV movie that he was hired to do a TV movie, and because he was hired to do it, he was able to get into the union. And I had worked with the director, Jerry Friedman, on other TV movies.
Yeah.
And Jerry recommended me to Alan as an operator because Alan didn't have an operator.
That's great.
He had operated all himself.
Yeah.
So he said, yeah, okay, we'll hire this guy, John Toll. And so, but I knew Alan from that. And I did the E.T. and all the E.T. documentary stuff. And then I started working with Alan as an operator. And so he got the Twilight Zone movie, and I became the operator on the Twilight Zone movie. George was really cool. You know, really, really cool.
This was right after Road Warrior, like it had just happened, or
it was a year. I was not right after, but it was a while.
Okay.
And but it was the first movie that he had done outside of Australia.
Yeah, that's a bit different, probably.
And Stephen hired him because of Road Warrior, you know, because it was so unique. So it started out. Alan asked Steadicam, Garrett Brown to come in and do, because Alan knew we wanted a mobile camera inside the plane.
Inside the plane, all right. Yeah.
And so Garrett came with his Steadicam.
Yeah. And
this was without much consultation with George, you know. And so we got in the plane. First day in the plane, George said, well, you know, there's a lot of turbulence in the story. There's a lot of turbulence in the plane, so we need a very active camera. Yeah. And I think that's why Alan thought of Garrett and the Steadicam, right? Yeah. And so we got the Steadicam out, and Alan said, and George says, it's not busy enough. You know, it's got to be more active. So we tried moving Garrett around with the camera, and George kept saying, "It's got to be more active. Got to be more active. More excitement." And so we started walking around handheld, and he says it's not active enough. So in the end, what we turned out doing is I would get the camera and hold it handheld and shake it as hard as I could.
Yeah.
And to the point where I wasn't able to keep my eye in the eyepiece. But the more I shook it, the more George would get excited about it. Because George would sit.
He is coming off the Road Warrior.
He'd sit in the plane. Well, he's unique.
Yeah.
He's the most unique director that I've worked with in film business. And a great guy. And Garrett would be trying to do some moves, Steadicam moves, which would be, and Steadicam is designed to be a smooth device, and George was looking for exactly the opposite. He says, "No, it's too smooth, too smooth." He says, "You was got to hand hold the camera and just." So I would hand hold it. He says, "No, it's too steady." It was like hand hold or Steadicam. The idea is you're trying to stabilize the camera, make it look like it's on a dolly. And George said, "No, take the camera and shake it." So after a while, I would shake the camera and look through, and he said, "No, more." And he kept saying, he'd be sitting right next to me, say, "More," looking at the monitor. And we're on an airplane mock-up. And we're trying to shake the mock-up as much as possible, moving around. He said, "More." So I'd start shaking the camera, and I could never get enough movement in the camera. So after a while, I would just close the eyepiece, just
move it.
Not even look through the camera, just look through my left eye alongside the mat box, so I could. It's a wider lens that I could pretty much tell if somebody was close to being in frame or not, And I would literally shake the camera.
And I'm going to watch this again with this in mind. Wow.
As hard as I could, take it off my shoulder, with a Panaflex or the 400-foot magazine.
Yeah.
Just grab the two handles and shake the camera and kind of look through not through the lens, but with my left eye along the mat box and see if I was close to being, like a gun sight. Do you think he's in frame or not? I was like, and when I would do that, George would sit next to me with a monitor saying, "More."
Oh my gosh.
More. And Garrett, and then we would use Garrett with the Steadicam, and he would run up and down the aisle shaking the camera, and George would just say, "More." So that was the whole story of that movie. And it was like, and it worked. It's like when you look at the film, it was like there's no sense of it. It just looks like
turbulence.
Oh, and we're in a mock-up, as the mock-up of a plane, and the special effects guys are shaking the plane as much as they possibly can, where it felt like the plane was going to, the rig was going to fall apart.
Oh my gosh!
No, it was great, and we go to dailies at Technicolor. We were shooting at Warner Brothers, and we go to dailies at Technicolor, and there was a guy named Dick Barlow, who used to be the head of production at the Warner Brothers, Brothers lot, and John Bickford.
Okay.
He was the dailies supervisor, and so Alan and George and I would go to Warner Brothers or go to Technicolor at 6 a.m. and look at dailies, and John Bickford and Barlow would sit in the back of the room, watching dailies, and our work would come up, and it would be all this really hard, all this shaking, cameras all over the place, and George would sit there going, "Yay, yeah, great, fantastic." And I'd look at Barlow and Dick Barlow and John Bickford, and they'd be looking at each other going,
"What is going on?
What the fuck are they doing?"
That's unbelievable.
But it was unbelievable. That episode is fantastic.
If it works, yeah.
The Man on the Wing on George Miller's episode of the Twilight Zone. It was unbelievable.
Now I got to watch it again with that in mind to see if it's how crazy it is. Because I remember it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think Almost Famous to me may be the perfect movie.
Almost Famous?
I think Almost Famous is one of the greatest movies ever made. And
really?
I mean, particularly there's a scene in there.
Cameron Crowe would be good to hear.
Cameron Crowe, it's a genius film. But there's a scene in there where I forget her name. It's been a while since I've seen it, but they're
Kate Hudson?
Kate Hudson, but I can't think of her character's name. She's anyway. But they're pumping her stomach in New York, and the kids watching, and it's pushing in, and there's an Elton John song playing.
Oh, yeah,
it's so beautiful, and it's just it's a fantastic movie. But I was wondering what that experience was like for you. Just because I have to ask, was it a good
scene or the whole movie?
Oh no, the whole movie. Just
it was good. I mean, because Cameron's cool. He's a really good guy.
Yeah.
But I don't want to use the word experimental, but we sort of it kind of had its own evolution, while we were shooting.
Yeah.
And it was personal for Cameron, obviously, because it's based on his story.
Wasn't he like 16 or 17 when he started?
Or 15, I think.
15.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it was crazy, And the beginning of the movie, there's a big concert scene in San Diego.
Yep.
And we shot in the actual physical location.
Oh.
Where Cameron is a 15-year-old.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, wow.
That was the actual, that whole stuff that happened in the back alley, the ramp and everything, was actually where that all happened.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's amazing.
So it was a really incredible personal story for Cameron.
Yeah.
And he was great. He was great, and he was really good with everybody. And
when you're doing something like that that's so personal to him, is it hard to continue the filmmaking process of it evolving as you're shooting it because he sees it a specific way, or was he open to interpretation of it?
It was. I mean, he was never adamant about our physical approach.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And it didn't have to be an exact 100% recreation of the event.
So you could take your liberties.
He was always conscious of the technique. And if we came close, that was good enough. Plus, the actors brought what they could do. He was more. I think he was more critical of performance and which is the actor's behavior as opposed to, photographically.
Yeah, it's a great movie and it's a beautiful movie. Frances McDormand in that movie.
Yeah, she was great.
She's great across the board, but she in that movie is so perfect when she has him on the phone and she's telling him what she's going to do with her son.
It was a lot of fun to do, and everything on that bus was shot on a bus on location.
A real bus driving around?
Yeah, a real bus driving around. And her boat was the key grip.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't figure out how we were going to move the camera inside the bus while it was driving. It was out in Mojave. We were driving. And there was a fixture in the roof. I guess it was for lighting. And there was a groove in there. In
the roof of the bus?
In the roof, in the interior.
Yeah.
And Herb kept looking at it and he said, I think I could create a rig, because I kept saying it's got to be handheld, but it would have been too awkward. Then it was too narrow between the seats. Sure. It would have been cumbersome, and not particularly photographically terrific. Yeah. And Herb said I could hang something from there, and so he was able to rig a Weaver Stebbin head from the roof, so we could dolly up and down the.
Wow! So it was underslung essentially coming down.
Yeah, it was underslung. It was a Weaver Stebbin head.
It's interesting because I always assumed that was some set or something. I didn't.
No, that was really think of it on location.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we were driving around Mojave.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was everything on the bus was shot.
Wow.
On a bus.
That's great.
And everything out the windows was. Yeah. Was out the windows.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And he was able to rig it. And he kept looking at it when we were, and I couldn't figure out how we were going to do it. Yeah. And he kept looking at it and said, we could hang a Weaver Stebbin head, and you could kind of just walk up and down the aisle, and that's what we did.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
And what about Braveheart? Because that seems like that was such an epic. I mean, it's a massive film, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, was it just when you go into something like that? Is it just completely overwhelming at first?
Yeah,
because of the size of it.
Basically, yeah. But it was. I mean, it's what Mel wanted. It's like, and I still can't figure out how I got that job.
You say that a lot, but I think it's based on your other work, probably.
Well, yeah,
right?
but the only movies that I'd done the only features I'd done as a DP were Wind, with the sailboat movie, and Legends of the Fall. And I think
Braveheart was your third movie?
Yeah. And I almost turned it down because I got the call to meet Mel. Right? I went to meet him, and we had dinner, and it sounded really cool. Because of my experience on Wind and Legends of the Fall, I knew that I needed to take people with me, like key people.
Yeah.
Gaffer and grip, maybe a camera operator. I knew I could operate it. If I had to, I could operate myself, but I would prefer not to, But I needed a gaffer and a grip. I had been shooting commercials before that, so, and I had, just before I got the call to meet Mel, I had done a commercial in London, and I had a really bad experience with the crew there, Then I got the call to meet Mel, met him, got along great. And then the producer said that, and I had mentioned that I wanted to take a gaffer and a grip. And the producer said, well, we can't do that. It's going to, there's lots of people in England who are good and were, obviously. And I said, well, I need people that I've worked with before. And only because of some unfortunate experiences with people I hadn't worked with.
Yeah.
I said, there's a big picture of Braveheart. I need people. I know I need the collaborative working relationship. Producer came back and said, that's not possible. It's you or nothing. And I turned it down.
Wow.
And it was really, it was quite uncomfortable because I met Mel and we had a good meeting. We went to dinner. And then he started talking to his producer, and the producer said, well, we can't afford to take more than the director of photography. And I didn't hear this until the second meeting when Mel and the producer were there. And they said, well, we can't afford to take it. And I just said, then I'm not the guy,
Wow. Which they probably did not expect, I would imagine.
No, and it was just three of us at dinner, and it was like before the hors d'oeuvres,
That's fantastic.
So that was the most awkward situation you can imagine, And because we were there going to talk about how we're going to shoot the movie, and all of a sudden I said, well, I'm not the guy. You got the wrong guy. But I didn't leave, I just had
to open up your menu and
I said, well, what are you going to have, And so. And then they started talking about the movie. Yeah. I would jump in and say something, and then they started asking me questions about this and that. And there was no agreement that I was going to do the movie or I was not going to do the movie. Everybody just assumed that, okay,
it was happening.
Looks like he's going to do it. I was like, and I went home that night thinking, I have no idea if I'm doing the movie or not. And so I got a call the next day, and it's like, okay, when do you want to go? And so then I was doing the movie. So I wound up taking a gaffer, a grip, and then eventually the camera operator that I'd used on Legends of the Fall.
Who was that?
His name is John Clothier.
Okay.
A great operator from Vancouver. One of the best operators I've ever worked with in my life. And a small guy, he's like, because I couldn't take an operator to Canada. And so we hired John Clothier. He was recommended. I had no idea where he came from. And on one of the first days of shooting, we're shooting a fight scene. And he had to do a shot, and he was operating. And he had to do a shot. He had to get really low on somebody who was on the ground and stand up, And he got into a position. It was with the Panaflex.
Yeah.
500 FM magazine. He got into a position where he was sort of crouched down, and he had his legs crossed, and he was like squatted. I mean, literally.
It's hard to get up from. Yeah.
Well, almost impossible. He tried doing it without a Panaflex on your shoulder and do that, and he had his leg crossed, and I'm standing behind him, watching. He said,
"How's that going to work?"
He said, "He's fucked." He said, "He's never going to be able to. He's never going to be able." And he just kind of like stood up. Put his leg, and then uncrossed his legs.
There you go.
And I said,
he knew.
He gets to do all the shots.
That's great.
Because I was still coming off of I'd worked on doing a lot of commercials, and I was always operating myself. Sometimes I would operate on other films, and so I watched him do that, and I said, "That's unbelievable. I could never do that." So he gets to operate all the time.
That's great.
And then when I went to England, and that was on Legends, and I went to England, I kept assuming, okay, well, I'm going to need an English operator or European operator. And I interviewed about 5 or 6 guys, and it was just, you could just tell the chemistry wasn't there, plus the working relationship operators, and it's a different working relationship, and the English crews. And I said, this is not going to work, And I went to the producer and said, I need to bring an operator. He said, okay. It's like, he said, okay, no problem. And I called John, and he was available, and John came and did Braveheart.
That's great.
It was the best thing I could have possibly done.
That's fantastic.
It was actually the best having worked as an operator.
Yeah.
I know what a good operator is. He could do shots that I would have found impossible.
That's great. Now, there's a great shot in the movie that I think is at the end with the sword flying through the air end over end, and then it sort of hits in the ground.
Good shot.
It did that?
Yeah.
Well, do you remember that as being a tough shot to get? Because it seems like it's a long
Well,
length.
that whole day was a nightmare. That whole day was at the end of the first battle sequence. The first battle sequence.
Oh, is that when it is? Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was. I mean, not in continuity in the film.
Yeah.
But in that location.
Yeah.
And we had shot that first battle sequence with the horse charge, and which was absolute nightmare, but it turned out great. And there was no plan for that particularly. It was the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And we had no plan. Everybody was exhausted because we'd just been shooting 2 weeks of the battle.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, now we're going to shoot the end of the movie. And I showed up that day, and the great AD guy named David Tomlin, had sort of set up a shot that didn't work. It was like the Scots were up in the hill, but the English were down, like literally about a quarter of a mile away.
Oh, gosh.
It just didn't work.
Yeah.
So we adjusted the shot, and we sort of improvised all that stuff with the sword, and it was all improvised on the day. We didn't know we were going to do it.
Yeah.
And then Mel shows up and said, well, I've got a couple ideas. And the idea of the sword through the air and was all the stuff that he came up with on the day.
Huh.
And John Clothier was such a fantastic operator.
Obviously.
He was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he could do stuff that I never would dream of even trying to do as an operator.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he was really unbelievable.
That's fantastic.
And literally the best operator I've ever worked with.
That's amazing.
And just the perfect attitude, it was like, nothing's a problem. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, and just does it,
So I could ask you questions forever, but I don't want to keep you forever. This is fascinating. But there's a new thing that is happening within the business where DPs have operators on headsets all the time. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, because I ask everybody this question.
I wonder what they talk about. What are they talking about? You're telling me pan left, pan right, less headroom. I mean,
Yep.
is that what's happening?
Well, I don't know what's happening with everybody. I mean, it's what I've been told before, because I essentially won't do it. I mean, if I'm on a remote head, obviously understood, and if you're half a mile away, and that's just I understand it. But I think there are a lot of people who they say, well, it's just faster. And I go, yeah, but I'm going to do the take, and then I'll come over and talk to you. Or my assistant's, if you need a last minute, no. But if you're talking during the shot, so
Well, I off the top of my head, because I haven't really experienced that.
But it doesn't sound like you do that.
If you don't have an operator that you feel confident enough in that they can compose a decent-looking image, then you got the wrong operator, And basically then... Or you should be operating yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't have confidence in your operator, then you're on the wrong track.
Yeah.
It's like don't hire that operator, or fire him and do it yourself, or you can't recompose every image. Off through a radio. So if you don't like the composition, so what are you going to tell them? Change the composition during the shot. It's like finish the shot, do another take, and DP operate himself. It's like.
I love that. I love that answer. It's everything that I agree with right there. But I ask everybody that because it's becoming more and more of a thing in the industry.
I
don't understand it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you don't either. And I feel like I'm a good company
concept.
there. Yeah.
It's like. Yeah. Like only I can compose the images. I mean, it's something. Then they should do it themselves. World. Just operate themselves. Why hire an operator?
Yeah.
If you don't have confidence in it.
Agreed. 100%.
I just worked with Peter Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah.
Great operator.
Yeah.
I'm not about to basically try to talk on the radio, telling him what he's doing wrong during a shot.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much for this. This was fantastic talking to you. I really, hearing all these stories, I enjoyed them so much. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Okay.
And
I just in terms of having worked as an operator,
yeah,
I definitely respect what operators do and appreciate the fact we have operators. If DPs don't have the confidence in an operator enough to basically just turn them loose, and they're working backwards, basically,
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed listening to John as much as I enjoyed sitting down and talking with him. What an amazing career, an amazing person, and just such great stories. It was fantastic. Please check out the website at theop.io. Instagram is the same handle. And if you like the episode, please hit those 5 stars, give us a good review, and share us with your friends. In the meantime, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.